From the great sweeping curve beneath the mighty roof of Newcastle Central Station, one of Britain's most beautiful Victorian railway stations, we begin our journey south along one of the most underrated railway routes in the country, the wonderful Durham Coast Line. For many railway enthusiasts, the great main lines of Britain often steal the spotlight. The East Coast Main Line, the Settle and Carlisle, the West Highland Line, but hidden quietly beside the North Sea is a railway rich in atmosphere, history, industry, dramatic coastlines, and fascinating railway engineering. The Durham Coast Line from Newcastle to Sunderland may not be long in distance, but it is absolutely packed with stories, scenery, and railway heritage. As our train eases out beneath the grand iron and glass train shed of Newcastle Central, opened in 1850 and designed by the famous architect John Dobson, we pass through one of the great railway cities of the world. Newcastle upon Tyne grew hand in hand with the railways, coal exports, heavy engineering and shipbuilding. For generations, trains departing this station headed north to Scotland, south to London, west into Cumbria, and east towards the coast and the collieries of County Durham. The Durham Coast Line itself is a fascinating route because it was never originally built as one single railway. Instead, it developed piece by piece during the great railway boom of the 19th century, created by a patchwork of different railway companies serving collieries, docks and industrial towns along the north-east coast. As we leave Newcastle behind, the line curves eastwards through the suburbs and industrial landscapes of Tyneside. Almost immediately, there is a feeling of deep railway history all around us. Freight lines, metro routes, old junctions and industrial branches still crisscross this part of the world. Reminders that north-east England was once one of the busiest railway regions anywhere on Earth. Soon we approach Pellore Junction, one of the key railway locations in the northeast. Here the route historically connected with the famous Liamside Line, once part of the original East Coast Main Line before the route through Durham became dominant. This whole area breathes railway history. Coal trains once thundered through here night and day, carrying black diamonds from the Durham coalfield down to docks on the Tyne and Wear. Passenger expresses, local trains, mineral workings, and shipyard traffic all competed for space across this incredibly busy network. Today, much of the heavy industry has vanished, but the railway still carries that powerful atmosphere of the northeast's industrial past. As we continue south, we pass through Heworth, where modern Tyne and Wear metro services share parts of the route. It is one of the fascinating features of travelling this line today. Modern urban transport running across infrastructure, with routes stretching back almost 2 centuries. The scenery now begins to change. Urban Tyneside slowly gives way to open views, wide skies and glimpses of the River Wear Valley ahead. The line gently winds through the landscape, and before long we approach one of the most historically important railway cities in northeast England, Sunderland. But before we arrive in the city centre, it is worth remembering just how important Sunderland once was to Britain's industrial economy. Sunderland was once one of the greatest shipbuilding towns in the world. For generations, ships launched from the Wear sailed across every ocean on Earth. Coal mines, glass works, engineering works, and docks surrounded the city, and railways were absolutely essential to its growth. The approach into Sunderland is one of the most atmospheric parts of the journey. The railway threads its way through cuttings, tunnels, and dense urban scenery before emerging beside the River Wear itself. One of the great engineering achievements of the Durham Coast Line was the construction of the Monk-Wearmouth Junction Line in 1879, linking previously disconnected routes and allowing through services between Newcastle, Sunderland, and the Durham coast for the first time. This huge project included the construction of the Monk-Wearmouth Railway Bridge across the River Wear, tunnels beneath the city, and the creation of a new central station. As our train rolls into Sunderland railway station, it is difficult not to admire how railways still sit right at the heart of the city. Today, the station is shared between National Rail and the Tyne and Wear Metro, giving it a wonderfully busy and modern atmosphere, while still carrying echoes of the Victorian railway age. Look carefully around Sunderland, and you can still see traces of its industrial and maritime past everywhere. Old docklands, railway arches, warehouses, and former industrial buildings still survive among modern developments. For railway enthusiasts, this section of line is fascinating because of the mixture of old and new. Metro units glide beside diesel passenger trains, while freight traffic occasionally still appears, maintaining a connection with the line's industrial roots. Beyond Sunderland, the true magic of the Durham Coast Line begins to reveal itself. The railway now starts to hug the North Sea coastline more closely, and suddenly the scenery becomes utterly spectacular. Wide coastal views open up, cliffs appear in the distance, and the enormous skies of the northeast dominate the landscape. This is the Durham Heritage Coast, one of the most beautiful stretches of coastline in England. For decades, this coastline was dominated by coal mining. Huge collieries stood beside the sea, spoil heaps towered over beaches, and industrial railways crisscrossed the cliffs and valleys. Yet today, nature has reclaimed much of the coast, transforming it into a place of incredible beauty. As the train races southward, there are moments where the North Sea suddenly flashes into view beside the line. On a bright summer morning, the water sparkles deep blue beneath the cliffs. In winter, the sea can appear dark, wild and dramatic, with enormous waves crashing against the shoreline beneath stormy skies. Few railway journeys in Britain combine industrial history and coastal scenery quite like this. Soon we reach Seaburn, one of the pleasant coastal suburbs north of Sunderland. The station itself may appear modest, but it sits close to beautiful beaches and promenades, which are hugely popular during the summer months. Further south, the line continues through Seaham, perhaps one of the most atmospheric locations on the entire route. Seaham is a town deeply shaped by coal mining history. Once surrounded by collieries, Seaham became famous for exporting coal from its harbour across the world. Yet today it has become one of the jewels of the Durham coastline. The approach to Seaham by train is magnificent. The sea appears dramatically beside the line, with cliffs and beaches stretching away into the distance. On clear days, the views seem endless. The town itself has undergone a remarkable transformation over recent decades. Where coal once dominated, visitors now come for coastal walks, sea glass collecting, beaches, and dramatic scenery. For railway enthusiasts, Seaham perfectly captures what makes the Durham coastline so special. This is not merely a railway from one city to another. It is a railway that tells the story of the North East itself. Coal, industry, shipbuilding, decline, regeneration, and natural beauty all wrapped together in one extraordinary journey. Historically, this coastal route was developed in the early 20th century to create a more efficient railway, avoiding steep inland gradients and improving connections between Sunderland, Hartlepool, and Teesside. Massive viaducts were constructed across deep denes and valleys, including the impressive Hordern Viaduct at Castle Eden Dean. The engineering required to build these coastal railways was extraordinary. Workers battled unstable cliffs, deep ravines, and harsh coastal weather to carve a railway through this rugged landscape. As we continue south from Seaham, the railway becomes wonderfully rural and peaceful. Open countryside stretches inland, while the sea remains only a short distance away. This section of line feels wonderfully remote at times. There is a sense of calm and openness which contrasts dramatically with the busy urban railways of Newcastle and Sunderland. The skies here are enormous. Sunsets along the Durham coast can be breathtaking, with golden light reflecting off the sea while trains glide quietly through the evening landscape. For photographers and rail enthusiasts alike, this route offers endless opportunities. Modern northern trains running beside the North Sea, freight workings against dramatic coastal backdrops, and the occasional engineering train all create wonderful scenes. Along the route, there are also reminders everywhere of the old colliery railways and industrial branches that once spread across County Durham like a spider's web. Much of the North East was built upon coal. Entire villages existed because of pits nearby, and railways connected them all together. Though the pits have vanished, the railway survives as a living connection to that history. Eventually, we begin to approach the Sunderland area once more from the southern side, and it becomes clear how strategically important this railway remains today. The Durham Coast Line still serves communities which would otherwise be isolated from the national rail network. It links Newcastle, Sunderland, Hartlepool and Middlesbrough, while providing vital local connections for commuters, students and visitors. And yet, despite its importance, it still somehow feels overlooked compared with many other famous railway routes. That is perhaps what makes it so special. This is a railway without pretense. A real working railway carrying ordinary people through extraordinary landscapes. The stations themselves are wonderfully varied. Some are busy urban interchanges, others tiny, quiet halts beside the sea. Many still retain traces of northeastern railway architecture and atmosphere. There is also something wonderfully nostalgic about this route. On grey winter mornings, with sea mist drifting across the line and the sound of diesel engines echoing through coastal cuttings, it is easy to imagine the railway during the final years of steam. One can almost picture northeastern locomotives hauling coal trains beside the coast, or early diesel multiple units rattling through the sea air during the 1960s and 70s. Even today, travelling this line feels like stepping slightly outside the modern world. The Durham Coast Line has character, it has atmosphere, it has history, and above all, it has scenery that deserves far greater recognition. Many rail enthusiasts travel thousands of miles to experience famous mountain railways or dramatic coastal routes abroad. Yet here, in northeast England, sits one of Britain's most underrated railway journeys. The combination of industrial heritage, coastal beauty, fascinating railway history, and friendly northeast communities makes this line truly unforgettable. Whether you are interested in railway engineering, British industrial history, scenic train journeys, or simply relaxing beside the window watching the world pass by, the Durham Coast Line offers something very special indeed. And perhaps that is why so many people who travel this route once eventually return again and again. Because this railway gets under your skin. It captures something uniquely British, the meeting point of industry and nature, of proud communities and dramatic landscapes, of old railways still serving the modern world. As our journey between Newcastle and Sunderland comes towards its end, we can reflect on just how remarkable this route really is. From the magnificent Victorian grandeur of Newcastle Central, through the industrial landscapes of Tyneside, across historic junctions and metro lines, into the heart of Sunderland, and beside the stunning North Sea coastline, this railway packs an incredible amount into a relatively short distance. It is a line of contrasts, urban and rural, industrial and scenic, historic and modern. A railway where every mile tells a story. And for any railway enthusiast visiting the northeast of England, the Durham Coast Line is absolutely essential. Thank you very much for travelling with me along the wonderful Durham Coast Line from Newcastle to Sunderland. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through the history, scenery and atmosphere of one of Britain's most underrated railways. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like, share it with fellow railway enthusiasts, and subscribe to the channel for many more railway journeys, driver's eye views, lost railways, railway history films, and archive railway footage from across Britain and beyond. And as always, thank you very much for watching and supporting the channel.